Welcome, everyone, to GSA's ITC Cloud mini-series. My name is Barry Hodge. I'm with the GSA's Federal Acquisition Service in the Information Technology category. Work within the IT product subcategory in the Cloud and Software division. Today, we're going to be exploring consumption-based ordering using requirements task orders. I have Jonathan Plant here with me today, who's a senior cloud strategist for the Cloud and Software division. Jonathan, we often meet with customers that have challenges purchasing cloud on a consumption basis. Can you talk to us today a little bit about some of the things that GSA has put in place to help agencies overcome some of those challenges?
Yes, Barry, thank you for the introduction. And yes, GSA has been proactively engaged in creating some new capabilities that are to support our customers in the procurement of cloud. And today we've put together a slide presentation that will review the new capabilities in addition to walking us through an example. During today's video, we're going to go over a couple of things on the agenda. We'll be doing a quick objectives and overview along with some definitions and terminology to level set our communications. And then we'll have a section of reviewing the CLIN structure, our contract line items, in addition to closing out with the benefits of requirements task orders and some additional resources that you can access. The objective and overview of this video is to educate the acquisition workforce on the new GSAM 552.238-199 special ordering procedures applicable when procuring cloud computing on a consumption basis that was released in March of 2022. This is the basis of requirements task orders, and we will demonstrate how requirement task orders are used to procure commercial cloud services, and hopefully we'll explain what GSA has put in place to assist our customers in the procurement of cloud services.
All right, so Jonathan, before we dig into the guts of this, a lot of times the customers we engage with are very new to using GSA vehicles. So can you talk a little bit about some of the foundational concepts folks need to understand in order to understand how requirements task orders can be used on GSA vehicles?
Thank you, Barry. Yes, we definitely want to level set our definitions and terminology so that we are consistent in our application of those terminology. And so let me highlight a few here that we'll be using through the video just to make sure everyone is understanding and we are keeping the same frame of reference. I'll commonly refer to things as catalog items. These would be commercial products or commercial services that are offered by mass schedule holders, but we also commonly refer to those as mass vendors. Mass vendors are required to maintain a catalog with a price list under their mass catalog for the commercial products and commercial services that they use, which for this video will generally refer to cloud services. When we refer to eligible users, these are the users that are authorized to use the multiple award schedule program, and they generally refer to federal, state, local, tribal, and territorial governments, but that is not an exhaustive list. You can also apply, you're also eligible users include any public universities or other institutions that are generally for the common public good. The Federal Supply Schedule, an FSS, is an acquisition program and an acquisition vehicle that has been set up by Congress for the purchase of buying products or services in large volume. And generally, when we talk about large volume, we're talking government-wide, which for us is a very large volume when we talk about cloud services. The Multiple Award Schedule, or also referred to as MASS, is the GSA directed and managed federal supply schedule. When I refer to an order, that could be a delivery order or a task order, and that is the order that is placed against the GSA multiple award schedule and is the foundational contract between the eligible users and the mass vendors in acquiring and providing the commercial products or commercial services. Requirements task orders is an order for fulfilling of actual purchase requirements in accordance with the GSAM authorization that created requirements task orders. And I'll be going into further detail of those as we go through this video.
So Jonathan, on the last slide, you talked about setting the stage, setting the baseline by you looking at standard mass order CLIN structure first. Why don't you talk us through that?
All right, thank you, Barry. Yes, definitely let's look at how things are done traditionally. And under the multiple award schedule, every vendor has a catalog, and that catalog is a line item. And when we look at procuring, there are three types of contracts or CLINs, contract line items, that we can do underneath mass, those being firm fixed price, labor hour, and time and materials. And for each catalog item that you'd be looking to procure, there would be a unique and specific CLIN for that particular catalog item. Now, if we look at the diagram here at the bottom, I presented four CLIN types or CLIN line items. The first two are firm fixed price, the third labor hour, and the fourth being time and material, for examples. But you'll notice that every CLIN has a unique CLIN number, a unique description, a specific unit price that's been that's off of the catalog or has been negotiated. There's a unit of measure, a quantity specific to that item that's being procured, in addition to the funded amount that has been obligated to that contract line item for the order. This is traditionally how a mass order would put together, and based on the number of distinct items you'd be procuring, you could have as few as one CLIN, or you could have up to hundreds of CLINs based on what you'd be ordering.
So relating this back to the original question, the challenge is typically being able to estimate that quantity field and that's based on a number of variables that occur, whether it's seasonal and other factors that influence how much your consumption is. Are you telling me that requirements task orders can help when those estimations are off?
Exactly right, Barry. What requirements task orders have allowed us to do is create much more flexibility around quantity and also around CLIN structure that I will address in the next slide. As I introduced in the previous slide, the new allowance creates requirements task orders. Now, requirements task orders, just to highlight, are only allowed under the multiple award schedule special item number 518210 Charlie, which is cloud computing and cloud related IT professional services. So this is unique to that specific SIN. Now, in addition to allowing firm fixed price, labor hour, time material, the allowance now allows for requirements task orders. All other CLIN types are still available. This is in addition to those CLIN types. Now, requirements task order CLINs have a defined scope at the top level. And let me highlight that now looking at the diagram below. You'll note on the first line, the CLIN type is indicated by RTO, standing for requirements task order. There's still a CLIN number, but in this case, under scope, we have listed this as cloud compute, infrastructure as a service. This is a high level scope that provides kind of a overarching umbrella of what will be allowed under the requirements task order. You'll notice that there is no unit price, unit of measure, or quantity listed. There is, however, a funded amount, and that funded amount is for the top level requirements task order. Now, under the requirement task order CLIN type, we have sub-CLINs. Think of these as child CLIN, with the requirements task order being the parent CHIN. Now, in this case, we've used the numbering scheme 1000.1, 1000.2, 1000.3. Depending on your particular financial or contracting system, how you annotate or index your subclins will be specific to your systems. However, when we look at the subclins, you'll notice now that the description, just like on a normal clin, is a specific catalog item or catalog service. In this case, we've used a small server for subclin 1001. For all subclins, you'll notice there is a unit price. This is again the catalog price or the negotiated price. There's also a unit of measure, but you will notice that the quantity is left void at this point in time due to the dynamic nature of trying to identify quantities. You do not have to identify a quantity up front. You'll also notice that the funded values are not there. The subclins are funded off of the requirement task order top level clin.
All right, so you've gone over standard CLIN structure under MAS. That's pretty clear. Good description on how requirements task orders are laid out. You mentioned that you were going to talk about side by side. That looks like what you're going to talk about here. So yeah, please inform us on this.
Thank you, Barry. Yes, for the next couple slides, we will be doing a side-by-side CLIN structure comparison. Our general layout will match here on the screen. The top level table indicated by the blue heading will always refer to or represent the standard mass order, and the table below it with the purple title bar will represent requirements task orders. And as I move through, the red checker dashed box will highlight various sections of the CLIN structure that we're going to talk about and differentiate. So with that right here and now, we're going to focus on the CLIN types. When we look at the standard mass order, again, you'll see that the CLIN type is defined. The CLIN numbers are normally sequential or are unique for each item. And now when we look at the requirements task order, you'll notice again, the requirements task order has a CLIN number, but now we've introduced subclin. The subclin is a child of the requirements task order. And thus the numbering is going to indicate that child-parent relationship. Now for this notional example, we have said the requirements task order number is 1000 and the subclin is 1000.1. Again, based on your specific financial systems or accounting systems, how you indicate a subclin will be specific to your systems. Now let me review the differences between descriptions. Now you'll notice on a standard mass order, as we indicated before, every CLIN is for a specific catalog service or catalog item and has a specific description. In this case, you'll see here on CLIN numbers 1 and 2, 1 is for a small server and 2 is for cloud storage. When we move down to requirements task order, it shifts slightly in the paradigm. A requirement task order at the top level has a scope. In this case, we've defined our scope as cloud compute or infrastructure as a service. Each subclin then under that requirements task order falls within the scope of the requirement task order CLIN. So in this case, our subclin is small server. And from our previous slide, we saw that the other subclins were medium server and large server. Noticing that the scope in this case are servers. Now there is no defined limitation on what we mean by scope. So the scope will be dependent upon your specific requirements and mission needs. So you could define scope in alignment with the different service models, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service, or you could even change the scope to align with your operational business offices. You could have a scope that supports your development team, another another scope could be for your production team. Another avenue of doing this is if you are doing, the scope was for software as a service. You could do the sub-CLINs based on super user licenses or subscriptions, general subscriptions, or training subscriptions. Those would all have different price points. But you'll notice that, again, they all must fall within the scope of the requirements task order. Now, continuing to move to the right, we move on to unit price. Again, as a standard mass order, every CLIN has a unit price. This can be the catalog price or the negotiated price, but is always listed on a CLIN per CLIN basis. When we move to requirements task orders, you'll note that the requirement task order parent CLIN, CLIN 1000, does not have a unit price. This is because the CLIN 1000 is only for scope. The sub-CLINs under each one define, as we said, a specific catalog item, and therefore has a specific and distinct unit price for each sub-CLIN. Continuing to move to the right, when we look at unit of measure, you'll see again for a standard mass order, every CLIN type has a unit of measure. In this notional example, per hour, per gigabyte, it is always relative to the item that you are procuring on that CLIN. Moving down to requirements task order, again, you'll note that there is no unit of measure at the requirement task order level. This is again because the requirement task order CLIN 1000, is only a scope. The unit of measure is applied at the sub-CLIN level where you have identified a specific catalog item. In this case, sub-CLIN 1000.1 is for a small server, and the unit of measure would be per hour. Continuing our movement to the right, we now start looking at quantity. Now, again, under a standard mass order, every CLIN has a defined quantity, a quantity of 1 up to whatever your requirements require. In respect to requirements task orders, again, because the requirement task order is only a scope CLIN, there is no listed quantity. At the sub-CLIN level, you'll also note that the quantity field has been left empty. This is to indicate, again, that no quantity threshold, minimum, max, or guarantee has been established. The quantities will be additive based on your actual consumption or usage of that particular catalog item. So in this case, for the sub-CLIN, a small server per hour. Post-award, as you execute, that quantity number is additive during your period of performance and would be populated based on your actual consumption. Continuing to move to the right and to our last column, we have the funded column. Again, at a standard mass order level, all CLINs are fully funded and have those funds obligated on a CLIN per CLIN basis. When we move down to the requirements task order level, you'll notice that the funding is only obligated to the requirements task order CLIN, in this case, CLIN number 1000. You'll notice that at the sub-CLIN level, there is no funding obligated. With the requirement task order, CLIN number 1000 acting as the parent CLIN, that funding on CLIN 1000 is used to cover all expenditures based on what is consumed for all sub-CLINs. There is no requirement, nor is it allowed to obligate funding at the sub-CLIN level for requirements task orders.
All right, so that all makes sense. I see how the open-ended quantity under requirements task order helps agencies align to those unknown shifts in consumption that we talked about. How does this work post-award? Give me some examples of how it works.
All right, thank you, Barry. Great question, and this is really where the benefits of requirements task orders really come into play. You'll notice here I've got 3 tables down below. I have shrunken the tables for size consideration, but I will walk us through those. And in the first table, the far left, you'll notice that we're starting day 1 of performance, and your quantity values are none because you haven't started, but you have funded and executed the requirements task order CLIN 1000. You have funded it $1 million. Now, as your period of performance progresses and you begin to consume or you begin to use cloud services, the quantity will populate, and that quantity is additive over time. So when we move to invoice 1, let's just say the October invoice, you'll notice that for CLIN numbers 1001 and 1000.2, you have established or consumed specific quantities. In this case, 5,000 and 10,000 respectively. Now, each one of those line items have a unit cost. Those costs are now identified in the cost column, and that would be $1 times 5,000 gets you 5,000. $3 times 10,000 gives you 30,000. Now, the costs are identified at the sub-CLIN level. They roll up to a total cost, in this case, for invoice 1, 35,000. And now when we move to the actual payment of the invoice, you pay the invoice at the CLIN level. So in this case, we funded $1 million. We have an incurred cost in invoice 1 of 35,000. We pay the 35,000 off of CLIN 1000, leaving a balance of 965,000. Now, as you continue to consume or use cloud services, those quantities are additive, and that is represented in invoice 2. In invoice 2, you'll notice that CLIN 1000.1 has gone from a quantity of 5,000 to 15,000. And similarly for CLIN 1000.2, you've gone from a quantity of 10,000 to 25,000. Now, calculating out the cost for each one of those respectively, 15,000 and 75,000, results in a total cost of 90,000. Paying the balance of the invoice now brings your balance of funding down to $910,000. This would continue for the duration of your period of performance and until your last invoice. Ultimately, on your last invoice, you can continue this way as long as you do not exceed the funding value of CLIN 1000. So there are 2 ways that execution under these CLINs end. The first one is you reach the end of the period of performance, and those CLINs are complete. The other one is if you are running, it would be if you were to reach the funded value early. So if you reached the $1 million in month 6, then this CLIN would be exhausted. And in this case, you could execute an optional CLIN, or you could add additional funding based on your specific agency's funding policies and continue to execute accordingly. But the main item here to indicate is that, again, the quantities are additive over the period of performance, and the funding is always dispersed from the top level CLIN or the requirements task order CLIN.
All right, so that all makes perfect sense. But as with any good thing, there's always rules and guardrails that we need to comply with. So talk to me a little bit about those so that I'm able to educate our customers on how to stay out of trouble.
Perfect, Barry. And in this case, requirements task orders, the terms and conditions are not very complex. They're pretty straightforward. And so the rules of the road here are really almost as simple as a stoplight. So in this case, the general rules, terms and conditions in this case is that requirements task orders are not second-tiered instruments. Even though it may appear like it's operating as an IDIQ under an IDIQ, a requirements task order is not a nested IDIQ. So you are good in respect to that FAR limitation. Requirement task orders are not an IDIQ under an IDIQ. Now, the other great thing about requirements task order is that the specific catalog items are priced at time of award, and they're fixed price at time of award, which is fantastic for contracting acquisition professionals in that makes requirement task orders and CLINs a fixed price contract or CLIN type. Requirement task order CLINs can be combined with any other CLINs, again, based on your requirements. So you have full access to also establish firm fixed price, labor hour, and time and material CLINs, in addition to requirement task order CLINs. Requirement task order CLINs can be executed at time of award. So when you award the contract or you execute an optional period, or the requirement task order CLINs can be optional CLINs within a period of performance. And this is fantastic where if you do not know exactly what your consumption would be over the course of the year, and you don't want to over allocate a budget. Let's say if your ceiling for your service for that year might be $1 million, you could almost use the 80%, 20% rule. You could create a requirements task order CLIN with $800,000 on it, and an optional CLIN with another $200,000. And based as how you would be executing during the period of performance, you may or may not have to execute that optional CLIN, which means you don't have to fund that optional CLIN until you execute it. And that's the next bullet here, where the requirements task order CLINs are fully funded at time of execution. So if it is a base award CLIN, it would be funded at award. If it's an optional CLIN, it would be funded when you would execute that option. And then all CLINs that you would execute on options execution would also be funded. Now, when you get to ordering and to award, in order to allow our vendors, the mass vendors, to understand your requirements, the contracting officer must establish a total order ceiling price for all estimated requirements. The estimate must be realistic, and that can be based on historical trends, market research, projections. But the nice thing here is you indicated that, but you are not bound to that on the requirements task order. There's no guarantee when you fund a requirements task order CLIN at $1 million, there's no guarantee that or requirement that you will fully use $1 million. You may ultimately only use $800,000. You only pay for what you consume based on the quantities that you consume. The idea here is, though, that you want to give the vendor, when they're evaluating your solicitation and they're putting together their proposal, that they have a basis of estimate to determine what price they want to offer to the government, especially when we start looking at volume discounts. And so we want to make sure you have a realistic value there, and so that they can bid accordingly. Now, post-award, there is some additional management tools that need to be involved. The vendor must allow or provide the ability for the eligible user, that's the CEO, to track the usage so that they can see their burn rate and track what they're burning against, to see if they're going to run out of funds or if they need to execute an optional CLIN. So that can either be a dashboard or a something that the vendor provides through a web portal, or they will have to be required to notify the CO when they reach 50% or 70% expenditures on the requirement task order CLINs. Note the 50 and 75 are notional thresholds. You can always negotiate with the vendors additional or alternative thresholds. But the main thing here is post-award, there has to be a mechanism for the government to know where they are in expenditures relative to their obligations. And note that a vendor is not required to continue performance if all funding has been expended. Once the value of the CLIN is zero, the vendor can stop providing services until the government provides more funding. So just something to be aware of. But as you can see, the rules are not too difficult or strenuous, and they're pretty much straightforward and provide really to make requirements task orders as easy to use with as minimum oversight as possible.
Great. That's very helpful. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about some of the benefits of using RTOs?
All right, and we'll do that on the next slide.
Great.
So yes, Barry, let me go ahead and now highlight the benefits of using a requirements task order. They are significant, both from an administrative overhead and from an execution perspective for those that are actually providing the mission needs, especially around cloud computing. So kind of group these into two categories. We'll start with the simplified order management. The nice thing is that requirements task orders allow for a collection of catalog items to be defined and priced at time of award without having to definitize quantities. Again, this doesn't require you to have a crystal ball and trying to project forward to a specific number that you will need 6 months, 9 months, or 12 months from now. You do have to provide that realistic estimate, but you do not have to have solid numbers. Especially in cloud computing, when you're looking at the dynamic nature of cloud computing, or if you are just migrating to the cloud and you don't have the fidelity or the clarity to project the quantities out, this is powerful in that it allows you to, again, identify the things that you will be using, but not have to say how many at a particular time. They allow for the selection of the catalog items based on your real-time requirements. And what I mean by that, if we look back to the examples we had on the requirements task order for the scope was cloud computing, you remember that we had small, medium, and large servers. Trying to identify what server size you may need, again, 6 months, 9 months, or 12 months in advance, if not longer, can be difficult. And so this allows in the real-time post-award execution for your cloud operators to really select the best server size, in our example, that is most cost efficient, but meets the requirement need. If you're simply running, in this case, a simple email system, you may only need a small server. If you're doing weather simulations that you need to have completed for tomorrow's hurricane season, you would probably use a large server for the extra compute. But again, you can determine that at time of the requirement materializing and at time of execution. You'll also notice that requirements task orders are limited by the obligated funding, not pre-established quantities. Again, that ability to fund at the requirements task order CLIN level and have the quantities determine what your costs are off of that top level CLIN is extremely powerful and really simplifies the administration. And that leads into our next things here, the simplified order funding management. The nice thing here is requirements task orders reduces the number of funded CLINs. Again, because we are allowed to scope it with using subclins under the requirements task order, you don't fund all those subclins. You only fund the top level clin. So that definitely eliminates your funding actions and the number you have to do. The other thing that we run into here that as a benefit is, again, since the quantities are being defined in real time and are being defined at a subclin level, you don't have to move funding around in order to increase quantities between the subclins. The funding all sits at the top level, meaning that the de-obligation and re-obligation between individual contract items is no longer needed. So if you needed more small server time under requirements task order, you're good. As long as you have the funding, you can increase that quantity number until you reach that funded value. The other nice thing is for those agencies that are working with 1 year or 2 year appropriations or have limited time duration of using the funding, by eliminating the requirement or the action of having to do a realignment, which is always a de-obligation, re-obligation, your funding availability can remain. If you award a contract in one fiscal year and you cross in the next fiscal year, under requirements task order, as long as you don't touch that funding on the top level, you can use that funding at the federal level into the next fiscal year without any issues. And that really is powerful, for especially for agencies that are working with 1 year funds, and it really helps them maintain and retain the capability of using those funds over that period of performance. Very powerful tool. Definitely something that once you start working with requirements task orders, and after this video, is something that you definitely, that we've been able to explain, and you see how powerful that is. But there are additional benefits. I've only highlighted a few here. As you start to work with requirements task orders within the outline here, you will see additional benefits that just really go to if you have a choice to use different CLIN types. The recommendation from the cloud SMEs within the ITC group is really start looking at requirements task orders first. And then if you can't do it as requirement task orders, look at the other CLINs as need be. All right, in closing of this video, I'd like to highlight some references that are not just applicable to requirements task orders, but also to the cloud SIN that should be useful to you as you move through your cloud acquisitions. The first one is NIST Special Publication 800-145, the NIST definition of cloud computing. This is the federal government's definition of cloud computing. It also forms the technical foundation for the cloud SIN under the GSA's multiple award schedule. FAR 8.4, federal supply schedules, is where you'll find the rules around federal supply schedules, how to order, how to use them. The GSAM 552.238-199 is available in the mass solicitation. This is where you can view the entire language of the clause and all the additional details in accordance with, as I will say, within the acquisition language. And then in addition to today's video, there is also a quick reference guide that is also available via that link that will provide, again, a nice narrative overview of requirements task orders. At this time, I'd like to turn it back over to Barry and thank Barry for giving me the opportunity to participate in this mini-series and to highlight the new requirements task orders in addition to their benefits.
Well, thank you, Johnson. Most of the thanks goes to you on this. I really appreciate you coming on board with us today and educating us on RTOs. For everyone out there, we do have some additional resources to share with you. We have our GSA MassN cloud page, which is linked. We also would like to invite you to join our Interact cloud and software community. That is where we publish new mini-series videos, other information regarding activities going on within our organization. So you'll see informative posts out there for that. Also, if you want to engage with us, we are available through our cloudinfo@gsa.gov address. We're available to provide you acquisition consultation and in some cases, some technical guidance around cloud procurements. If you work internally with the technical team, the Cloud Information Center is available on GSA websites that will give you general information around cloud architecture, cloud operations, and other areas. So I'd like to close out and thank everyone for listening today. We look forward to working with you in future efforts.